It's now, and this meeting is being recorded. We thank you all for coming to us. This particular webinar will be, and it will be up on our website. This is Susan Fields from Health Force, Minnesota, and we have today with us Dr. Joseph Buhane, who is going to be doing a very interesting presentation on debriefing and pre-briefing for simulation. But before we get started, I'd like to go through a little bit of housekeeping with you. The first thing is that if you've got questions during this presentation, please use the chat area, and you can chat with us and ask questions, and we can answer those towards the end of the presentation. The next slide here doesn't want to go. The next thing that I would like to do is I'd like to show you where you can find particular webinar along with the handouts if you like handouts for a presentation. Be up on the healthforceminnesota.org website / simulation, and the password is simulation. And go up there very quickly just to show you where it is. Oh, so here's the Health Force Minnesota website. If you go to curriculum, it will be under simulation / and use simulation. The first thing that comes up on this website is the MnSHEP website. So just go into there, ask for the password is simulation with a capital S. On the left-hand side, you will see newsletters and webinars. Go into that, and we'll have this recorded after this presentation. We have the handout right here in a PDF form in red, and we also have the winter newsletter and the fall newsletter. Things to be aware of: we will have a virtual simulation webinar in February, and we will have a site visit at the North Hennepin Community College Simulation Center in March. Those can both be found in the winter newsletter. If you have problems hearing us along the way, please put chat in for us so that we are aware of that. Time. And I'll tell you about, first of all, about Dr. Joseph Buhane. Dr. Buhane is the Program Director for Respiratory Care and Simulation Studies at Paul College. He is also the Associate Director for Concordia University for their Respiratory Science program. He's got about 20 years of experience in simulation. He started when he was in the military 20 years ago. So we're really excited to have Dr. Buhane. And just so you're aware, our MnSHEP group is not for nursing only. This is for allied health. So if you've got people that you know of that are in allied health that would like to be part of MnSHEP, please forward our newsletter to them. At this point, I'm going to let Dr. Buhane take over. I'll do the let's see. Okay, sorry, it didn't look like he's being picked, so I'm going to give him my phone to use.
Okay, sounds great. Again, thank you so very much for allowing me to be here and talk a little bit about debriefing and pre-briefing. An honor for me to speak to some collegiate personnel in this group that has an interest, as well as I do, in simulation. I'm hoping this information brief that I give you gives you a broad new understanding of how to do some debriefing. I'll touch on a little bit of pre-briefing, but really the main focus in this simulation or this concept we're talking is about debriefing. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Simulation, we typically begin with some type of scenario or some type of event. Sometimes you guys might talk about certain issues or situational crisis or events. And a crisis and event, we typically bring you some type of way of presenting this. I do this for every student at the very beginning of class, in the very beginning of the semester, or even healthcare providers. They have an understanding with PVCs, multidimensional, bigeminies, trigeminies, and so forth. And I'm hoping this gives you an idea of what we're looking at to expect. Time does matter. With highly mannequin simulations, again, some of you might have seen this in the past, and outlined several studies that's been discussed here. They talk about simulation being a conduit and an importance factor for understanding, and without debriefing, it becomes meaningless. Salvaldi in Anesthesiology in 2006 says, without debriefing, there's no benefit. Helkman in Simulation in Healthcare in 2010 stated that, every structure that we design our simulation needs adequate feedback. Without no feedback, no clinical learning can become relevant. Therefore, parameters must be set. 2008, you had Rothberg, Leonard, and Day at 2010, and then Jeffries. Jeffries is key here for the NLN, or for the nursing department, because Jeffries really designed 5 key factors, which we'll talk about later, when it comes to simulation practice. She provides a lifelike environment where students can practice psychomotor skills, clinical reasoning, problem solving, and really work together. It is the foundation and basis in all of the healthcare industry. With many of you out there might have certain things out there like task trainers or mannequin, low, medium, or high fidelity. You might things like software or video-based concepts. Some 3-dimensional or 3D diagrams where you can use virtual reality within a room. And some of you might use standard patient care where it's student-to-student contact. Whatever type of simulation you use, the concept is we always need to have some briefing or pre-briefing preparatory to the exercise. So these are just general types. What do practitioners, educators, facilitators do? Communicate. And how do we communicate? Either through spoken word, visual images, written word, and body language. These areas are very important because without that, this can become an issue to some patients and to some simulation processes. Facilitators who design must have our briefing and debriefing, they're simulated towards how we're going to give that impact towards the student or to the practitioner. These are the key elements that we look at. How the body language is going to be, how the visual impairment is going to be, how the written word is going to be in regards to SOAP notes or the nursing orders or anything in regards to what we can deliver or give to the learner as they progress through simulation. Process. We have the sender, the receiver, and we have information as it goes through. What's happening is there's a breakdown of communication through the process. Often that can lead to impairment. So the sender would give some information that could be medium or a channel receiver, and hopefully the receiver decodes that information and gives it back to the sender. So if that feedback is positive, then they're able to encode and decode the information appropriately. If not, then it happens. Barriers, and you can get barriers that affect the process of communication, and that is where simulation can become very powerful and ineffective. Okay, so what you've seen is called the iceberg. That culture as an iceberg. And one of our participants is an iceberg. What they see with the simulation is is merely what we give them initially. Think of it like this. Pre-brief is the tip of the iceberg. Pre-brief is just the tip of everything that you can see the student or the practitioner knows initially. Information that you want to gather is underneath that iceberg. All the student's way in determining it, either through their belief, either through their values, either through the way they learned it, either through some conceptual evidence-based, either through some through learner process. That way, we get the heart and the concept, the soul of the matter, the deeper meaning. The reality is that everything that we know, this can only be seen in the tip of the setting. Well, when we evaluate a patient, is go deeper into the situation and allow the student to find those little segments of the iceberg for them to understand that. Oh, pre-brief. What pre-brief students or some of the practitioners might have this thing called clinical reasoning versus clinical decision making. Some of the ones who want to know so much more about the scenario that's going to come in is really because they don't know they know too much of the information because they learned it or they on the information because they read it through evidence-based. Clarifies the scope of what we're doing. What we do here is we wanted to make it safe. We wanted for the patients to know or the student to know what they're doing and what the simulation is. But in regards to brief is how do you want the response to be? Do you want it to be the student to respond as a gut feeling, which is called reasoning, somewhere along the line, I knew this process, or do you want the brief to be, you know what, just learn this concept through the Journal of Medicine, the National Nursing Association, and know this has some safety and accountability through evidence-based. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to determine what process is going to be and the basis and scope of that pre-brief. Students sign a consent, a photograph, and videotape. All do that. It's something that's very important. Have them understand the materials that's in there and that they would be videotaped. So every pre-brief requires this. So that's an example.
Can we get a sample of that example and put it up on the MnSHEP website so people will have that?
Absolutely. I don't think there would be a problem with that. The next PowerPoint, please. The phrases in simulation is typically said. This information was really taken from the Journal of Safety. What they wanted to do was they wanted to define simulation as the pre-briefing, debriefing, and the actual communication or style of communication during simulation. With this one, the pre-briefing, these are three things I want to talk, or these are several concepts I want to talk about. First, adequate preparation. You need to be able to prepare the student or the practitioner in what they're going to be doing. Make it realistic as possible in the laboratory setting and allow the mannequin and do what you need to do to allow the student to feel like they're in that same clinical simulation. Ground rules. Rules are imperative because in most situations, there are those with different leadership styles that can affect the way simulation progresses, and we'll talk about that in a second. And you need safety, psychological, non-competitive areas where there's safety in the patient, in the practitioners. One of the things I use, and I'll talk about this, is the term safety, times 3. That's going to be in a couple PowerPoints from here. So I use that word to really define something that could be a critical error or critical incident that might be of concern. It could be optimal effort, acknowledge the mistakes that occur, and tell them, you know what, things can occur during the simulation and during the pre-brief. It allows students and practitioners to loosen up a little bit, to understand that this is the safety environment. I provide feedback. I'm sorry, I do not provide pre-feedback. I provide background information that tells the tip of the iceberg. I'm the tip of the iceberg to the student to allow them to understand and to review what they can do. And I use a thing called the Rule of 8, and we've learned this in the military. It says too long, too quick, too much, too direct. Let the students learn. If you do it too long, that's good. If too quick, they've learned anything. You give them too much information, then you've given them the scenario. If you're too direct with them, you need to let the student learn enough. So the rule also applies to every student, depending upon the simulation, should have at least 8 minutes of valuable time. So every student should have given me something worth of 8 minutes in a simulation that's typically 20 or 30 minutes long. I need to see you do something with 8 minutes. So I use that rule of 8 as a pre-brief saying, you need to be able to do this. Safety, if there's a concern, during the briefing, I would say if I see an error like a needle, if I see something that can define a safety condition where it could be life, limb, or eyesight, anyone can call this during the pre-brief or during the simulation. For me, I use safety, safety, safety. I would yell this out over the web or over online. It halts everything. It stops everything and prevents any critical incident from occurring. Other terms I use in pre-brief is simulation begins, simulation ends, and since I'm the facilitator, I don't tend to go in during the simulation. They have to call the doctor. So I have a phone number to call me. Those that were very critical during pre-brief, that allows the student to know, hey, I've got something, I need to know this. If I hear simulation begins, it's beginning. If I hear simulation ends, I've met the objective, and I have a phone call if I call the doctor. The Joint Commission of Journal and Safety, and what they did here was in 2011, 2009, 2004, Neal and Wooten and Lashley, they do this thing called the Quality and Patient Safety Peer-Reviewed Publication, and what they wanted to do was look at safety. Safety was a key element, and they invited many people to do manuscripts. They've done this for over 40 years, and one of the things they focused on was pre-briefing. When they use this as an example, they said here, does the hospital understand the need for both recurring and critical incidents? So basically, I could revert that saying, do you, student, understand why cardiac arrest is an important factor for us to review? Is the hospital supportive of the debriefs to ensure that they are used to the opportunities to learn and grow? Did you learn about the concepts for CPKMB, troponin, laboratory tests for cardiac enzymes for cardiac arrest? I'm giving them the pre-brief to help them in a way to understand that, you know what, this is the scenario that we're going to go to, and this is why it is important for you to know that during simulation. That they talk about. So this is leadership. Goldman himself Daniel Goldman. He wrote an article called "Leadership That Gets Results." He defines issues within simulation, or actually leadership, that says not a student, not every doctor, nurse, respiratory therapist is going to be a follower. Is in the position where they are needed. And the problem is, these leadership styles that he has really looks at different leadership styles that every one of us might give. So depending on the leadership style of coerciveness, authoritative, affiliative, democratic, pacing, or coaching, these leadership styles can either promote emulation or can here for learner progress. So I present this when I have my students during the pre-brief, and I would tell them, you has a different learning style. It has a different way of being a leader. It's not to say it's good or bad, but it's something that we need to understand, because if you have two people that are coercive or two people or three people that are authoritative, the simulation goes into a different direction. This is very important because we learn through some process and through some understanding. The very top it says concrete, experience and feeling. At the right side it says reflective, and at the bottom, right at the bottom, it says abstract and thinking, and to the left it says active and doing. What we want to do here is really, as practitioners, we want to converge on think and we do, because what we've learned in clinical practice is that. We want to avoid the feeling and doing and feeling and watching, because the areas often are something that has reflective value, subjective value. In clinical practice, we want to do and act based on the stuff, the materials, the abstract and active information. So because it has a different learning style, we have to look at the way they do things and convert that information towards that. So Kolb's learning style defines the process of innovative teaching. How this works, and I think some of you might have seen this. I do apologize. There is some spelling errors in here, but you'll see how simulation does work in this office. I don't know if it's
Last week I gave a fire safety talk. It paid any attention. It's my fault for using PowerPoint. PowerPoint working. People learn in lots of different ways. But expand. Just teacher. I think it's going to save lives.
Did you bring your jerky in again?
Oh my God! Oh, fire! Oh my goodness! What's the procedure? What do we do, people? Oh, how did that happen? Down in the hall. No, we don't know that. The smoke could be coming through an air duct. Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody think, what's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure? Wait. No, Michael, no. If it's hot, there could be a fire in the hallway. Where's one? Not a viable option. What next? The other door. The door. Check that out. How's the handle? It warm. They go to the door. Another option. Leave it, woman. Get out of the way. Things can be replaced, Phyllis. People, human lives, however, can. This one's not true. Okay, we're trapped, everyone. Go. Have you ever seen a burn victim? Okay, procedure. Exit option. Where do we go, folks? Use a what to cover the mouth? A what? A damp rag trap. Remember those procedures. What are the options? That's the wrong way. We've already tried that. Remember your exit point. Exit point, people. What's next?
Stay alive, I'm getting help. Hold up.
You're too heavy.
I only weigh 82 pounds. Expand it.
How about 911? Anyone? 911. Use the surge of fear and adrenaline to sharpen your decision making. Okay, I am not dying. The fire exploding at us! This is a test of our emergency preparedness. There is no fire. It was only a simulation. What? Fire? Not real. This was merely a training exercise.
next one.
What was it?
The commentary that from the office, and I take accolades to the office for doing this, because this is a way for us to really understand what simulation comes in. And during the simulation, it really is an understanding of, PowerPoints doesn't often do the justice towards what we do in simulation for our practice. So the dean does present this as a viable feedback for feedback and outcome. Escape for time.
Oh, hi.
I know, but you were saying.
Oh, we gotta watch
All right,
it.
we can watch it.
No,
So
we have to watch it.
I had to set up, but sometimes specific training is important after a critical incident. So when an incident occurs, you do a secondary simulation scenario followed by debriefing. This is the simulation that was used post simulation of the first one that you saw.
So, assessing the situation. Are breathing.
Rows, not breathing. And they have no arms or legs.
No part of it.
Where are they? If we come across somebody with no arms or legs, do we bother resuscitate them? What kind of quality of life do we have there? Who would want to live with no legs? How no arms? No arms or legs is basically how you exist right now, Kevin. You don't do anything.
All right, back to it, because you're losing them. Everyone, we need to pump at a pace of 100 beats per minute.
Oh, hey, that's hard to keep track. How many is that per hour? I'll let you know. I will add and then count to it.
Okay, a good trick is to pump to the tune of Still Alive by the Bee Gees. You know that song?
Yes, I do. I love that song. I was afraid I was petrified.
No, it's Stay Alive, Stay Alive.
You were in the parking lot earlier. That's how I know. Staying alive, staying alive. Staying alive, staying alive.
You can't tell by the way I use my walk. I'm a woman, no time to talk.
We end up having a debriefing, and if you continue on with the video, they'll have a debriefing, and they talk about the positives and negatives during the simulation. So that is one that I often use with my practitioners, and I know that things can have a different turn, and we always have a debriefing to have some sort of assessment of what we learned. Information that was presented once Lairall came about is debriefing as an important tool by Dr. Thomas Noack. And it's something out there. It says in 2006, 2010, it's literature that represents that, debriefing identifies great important aspects for clinical learning. Best practices, three of the most ones that came out. This is from the Journal of Anesthesiology, especially in 2000. This is one of the first ones that came out. It says concept, description, and analysis is a good best act. Observation is also a good best practice act. Trial and error around outcome-based is also a good best practice act. These are the general ones that people use. They use description, they use outcome-based analysis, they look at information, and they look to identify what went right and wrong. So in most of our clinical practices, we try and identify what things we can improve towards the simulation practice. So I talked about Jeffries in the past, and Jeffries really was one that stemmed the National League of Nursing to a higher level. If you look here, there is the teacher, the student, and the educational practice. And the process here is that every teacher and student in concept education has to deliver some type of outcome. Maybe learning, skill, learner, critical thinking. But what Jeffries did in 2005 and then 2007, he's identified 5 key components. Those 5 key components were objectives, fidelity, problem solving, student support, and debriefing. With those key components, he then made it measurable for or anyone in simulation to identify outcomes through simulation. To you now, it was done in 2013. There are 7 standards. Actually, it goes to 8 to 9 standards, but there's 7 standards that's out there. Oh, there it is. standards out there that's utilized. And I'm going to focus on is best practice acts for number 6 and 7. I'll begin with number 6 here, best practices. And what I want to talk a little bit about here is simulation-based learning. Under this, from the Clinical Journal of Nursing for Simulation, states that learning should include a planned debriefing session aimed toward promoting active thinking. That it's a 3-page report that really looks at the criteria of facilitating a proper debriefing. It's all about facilitation. Okay, and I'll revert back to criteria. Number 7, this is critical. In criteria number 7, they identify the first one as a good practice act assessment. Development of an objective, idea that you have for simulation. It's designed to meet participant outcomes, feedback, and remedy errors that might be occurring during that simulation. This formative assessment is a tool that you do during debriefing. It's an accommodation, appropriate level of time for experienced participants. It's a level for them to allow achieving participant outcome. So when you do your debriefing, that's one assessment tool you can use. It's called a formative assessment based on knowledge, attitude, and skill. Then about in criteria number 7 for Best Practice Act is summative evaluation. Summative evaluation, this establishes interrelated reliability. So in nursing, anything that has interrelated reliability, or even in respiratory, we need validity and reliability towards what we assess and the outcome that we're trying to assess with. This has an evaluation process. This one has a fidelity level. This one has guidelines for queuing. These has ways for us to terminate the scenario. These are criteria allowing the evaluator to be more independent towards each participant around the group. So summative evaluation looks at the overall criteria that's being done and the competence that's being done during the time frame. 3, which is the last one, this is called the high stakes evaluation. This is a standardized format in scoring. This is a way for us to base information based on participant objectives. This situation can do a reflection towards the simulation in conjunction during the debrief. It'd be a way for us to evaluate performance as an evaluation. To use, instead of just simulated regular simulated facilitators, we use experienced facilitators who have been exposed with situation as observer and rater. The objectivity and really defines comes as well in regards to the patient or the participants who's being used it. However, we try and avoid, when possible, who've experienced in some of these issues situations where it came negative. We have someone who's seen in the situation to come in and judge these individuals. So the best practices. Again, there's a site out there that allows you to download the abstract and the PDF file, and this is located within the clinical simulation in nursing. There were standards that were presented in 2013, and just recently, June 2015, presented factors, debriefing, design and simulation, and architect and simulation that was presented in June of 2015. There are standards 8 and 9. So this is best practices. I think that's just an update. Okay, so I did a meta-analysis in a way, and I took all information from everywhere. I took it including the simulation here that we have, and I said, what are the characteristics of debriefing? We found out that Letterman in 92 says, you know what, the thing that's presented in the simulation are critical elements, and there are 7 criteria on there. You must have, when you're debriefing, a guide to debrief the person. You must have the participants in that. You must have the experience to know the concept, or at least the information to know the concept. You have to know there must be some reflective impact impact, a direction of it, a videotape it, a mechanism of experience and time progression. You have the environment. Present the person, the situation, the crisis, the event in an environment that's lucrative for educational process or clinical learning. With time, you think is 2 to 3 times longer than simulation. So dated here, Anderson in 2008, so 20, 30 minutes and ideally 2 to 3 times the actual length is what is typically seen. And 20 minutes becomes repetitive for some clinical simulation processes. So I try and avoid giving longer durations in simulation unless there's really a large objective that we're trying to define. But this has really 2 parts. We're really trying to find facilitation, intermediate facilitation, low impact facilitation, which we'll talk about later, and just gradual learning progress, and then student role and objectives. Later, now I talked about facilitator a long time in debriefing. Manage the complexity of aspects, clearly communicates objectives, validates, and creates a learning, safe learning environment. It's the person who designs the complexity and information for simulation. It gives us the information back. That's your facilitator. Question of who often should be debriefing. Nurse, should it be the educator, should it be the doctor, should it be the person who's not even in the room. Often confusion over the debriefing process on who should be doing this. The CN or the NLN and the clinical practice guidelines that we've seen, I really identified that it must be the person who is in progress, who has reviewed the video, who has the ability to engage, talk, communicate, and reactivate the interest of the participant, has some guidelines of clinical competencies based on the objectivity that you recognize, good decision-making, good behavioral skills, and answer clinical assessment questions relatively towards the simulation process. So should other people who are in faculty or other people outside this role, can they come in and play a factor in debriefing? Sometimes faculty with experience have a guided role. Sometimes people that have knowledge of certain deficiencies can answer questions through evidence-based. Some objectivity or expectations that participants might not know or have a clear understanding and the facilitator can't understand, can add in. A, it has to be constructive. It has to be measurable. There has to be a reason to bring them in. Most videotapes are confidential, and it's not something you invite other faculty members in or other participants in. It is if there's a question that really needs set guidelines or information that you can't answer, people in. And at length, I think we talked about this, 20 to 30 minutes. In 2003, 2006, the NLN did a study, and they said, in clinical scenarios, a minimum of 20 minutes for debriefing is critically needed. Recommended under the Best Practice Act, under the clinical simulation, is 2 to 3 to 4 times the length of the scenario, and that's what we're finding out to be good. Debrief. There's a question of, should I do it right after? Should I do it the day after? 24 hours after? 48 hours after? Current studies have shown under Len, Freddy's, or Jeffries, and Mayo Clinic, within 30 minutes of the onset of the simulation, debriefing needs to occur to de-stress or debrief critical incident that has occurred, or critical awareness, or critical competency. It's no cell phones, no pagers. It's a review towards a reflection, a constructive review, a reflective analysis of the behavior and the outcome that needed to be measured. Visual recording be integrated. With or without videotape is fine. In most situations, videotapes are necessary for an overview. Remember, they need to sign. outcome, allowing them to be debriefed with videotaping to help stimulate the discussion and behavior of the student.
And there was a question about what do you do if a student won't sign a consent?
When a student doesn't sign a consent, there's in my experience, they always have. It's a graded analysis. And if I can get 2 or 3 other students who won't sign a consent on that information, then we do a simulation without videotaping. And then we actually end up doing a simulation without videotaping. And do an open subjective feedback. Because those things become subjective rather than objective. And the student starts to complain about, well, I didn't get it measured, the other students actually do the self-reflective assessment. So whatever happened to me, I have set guidelines that if you don't want to get video recorded, the analysis, the overview and debriefing will be not through me, but through years around you towards that outcome. How visual, again, we talk with or without, that's fine. In my situation, the video recording works well. I do want to make one recommendation during simulation. Scrub tops or women. I do have a visual where we can watch people intubate that can zoom in very quickly. And if you bent over, you want to be very, very personal over your clothing. So I tell everyone scrub tops. It's very important because I can zoom in much so, and we have to be very precautious when we do the debriefing. Should video, again, talks about stimulates good conversation. Do not state any technical errors. If you state, that's one thing I've learned, if you state you have a technical error, they say that the simulation is not good. So any technical errors, put emphasis on clinical perspectives and objectivity. It's a great for us to do an introduction, especially for beginners, and position yourself towards the visual, towards the simulation progress. Debriefing a little bit more closely with the time we have left. National League of Nursing Simulation Innovation Resource Center is called CERC. They identify the 3 concepts is that within simulation there's or simulation debriefing, there's a beginning and middle and closing. Simulation with some concept of, what you learn, to identify your learning progress, what happened during simulation. During the middle, you become reflective, summative, flip towards the assessment, and with some critical thing that you want the student to learn and take away. So, begin any debrief with something that what needed to happen, what happened, and using statement. The clinic looks at this concept of debriefing, and they say, you know what? Debriefing should be based on experience, reflection, contemplation or conceptualization, and experimentation. So we have learned, or the process of what you have learned in the simulation. How did this promote your profession? And what could you done to help better position yourself in that simulation process? And in a way, conceptualization is that occurring. Happen to have a visual of seeing that situation or event occurring even before it didn't occur, and then you try something new for orientation. That's a good concept. This one I like. I enjoy this one. This is the one where we did in the military. The military had the after-action review, and there's a debriefing model called plus and delta. The plus and C, and then the delta is, a lot of people say 3 negatives and 3 negatives. Never likes negatives. One likes delta because delta means things that can change. Give me 3 things that are good during the simulation that you did as a team, as a person, and as an individual in your clinical practice or simulation, and things that you could change. And this. Why? It avoids harming these classmates. It avoids putting up identity on yourself. And it's not a difficult one to do. Outline this. Now, I do not use the board. I do the board. Because anytime I use my classroom board, students go in a classroom. In a small room, I define 3 positives and 3 is proven. I never put anything on the board because I don't want the students or the practitioners that I'm in a classroom. So I took this. This is a formative assessment tool that came from Sophia, debriefing after simulation guidelines for the faculty and students, this study that was done. And what this is, it looks at all the different models that I've talked about, the NLN, the CIRC. It talks about the Mayo Clinic model, the Delta in 2009, 2010. That's the one that I love. I think students and practitioners enjoy that the most. There's one that's called advocacy and inquiry, and it's observation. What do you think? What do you inquire? What would you observe doing different? What's great about this is you have students or practitioners that are not involved. Emulation, this statement of observation based on what the clinical practice was done. So if you had more than 10 students and you only have 5 students doing simulation, great to do. Letterman talks about reflection analysis, generalization, personalization. So if you're going to intubate someone, let's make it you. Let's look at this and intensify this idea. So when we do the debriefing, it's about segmenting you. It's a reflection analysis on what you did and how you could have done better in that situational event. Next one. 2006, 92, they talk about GREAT, G-R-E-A-T, as a great debrief model. You set the guidelines. What are your guidelines that you need to accomplish? What are the recommendations that need to occur? Events transpired in this event. Anything you can state or do differently. What's your analysis? How have been done differently, and then anything to assess or transfer that information more easily. Like, was the medication given at a timely time? Was the transfer of information quick enough based on your leadership type skills? So here it says experience, identify, analyze, and generalize. The 4 E's is another great one. That leads to the cause. That leads to the cause. The emotions, if you're looking at reflective, looking at summative, so that death and dying patient, that care patient, that terminally ill patient, the great one, because there's an event that's occurring. There's things that's involved with the practitioners. There's empathy that's involved with the practitioners. And there's an explanation that's objectivity based on that. Great one to use for the death and dying and long-term mechanical ventilated patient that's terminally ill. You have Fanning and GABA. They have the 3D modeling model for debriefing. Sometimes such an influence of high intensity with practitioners that we need to desensitize them to use a situational crisis. And sometimes there's an event that led to death. One would be a great one. So if there's such a high emotional impact that's occurring there that there's just a crisis or event, diffuse the situation, let them rediscover what right and wrong, and let's find a deeper understanding of what could have been challenged or been better. Then I guess people get is, that's great with debriefing, but get better. Well, everyone, then we have this, and Dr. Fields has been very, very prominent about this. He has developed this collaborative information, and this is what we're doing. We're taking ourselves to this level where we debrief ourselves or debrief the debriefer, so we understand that they can do right and wrong. Cash method, debriefing assessment for simulation. Have you measured yourself to maintain a category of good assessment tools? Because most of you, there's other debriefers in there. There's that's doing simulation, but you all using interrelation reliability score. So it's in this tool that's used. You can pull that online, and DES. debriefing experience scale. Again, if you have something measurable, you can just pull it online, Dash and Desk, and those are assessment tools that help you, all your debriefers work in conjunction with each other. 6 elements: establishes an engaging learning environment, maintains engaging learning environment, structures an organized way, provokes engaging discussions, identifies and explores the gaps, and helps simulation prepare participants achieve and sustain good practice. This is designed and by peer faculty during the debriefing. So these key rating scales were important so that your all objectivity is very similar to one another. This is a newer tool. It talks about 2 concepts: the student experience during debriefing and the most important experience that they learned during the progress. And the way for students to express themselves, be evaluated. So it's an expressive tool. Based on 20 items, and it has a Likert score of 1 through 5, and they analyze, or 1 through 4, and they analyze the thoughts, the feelings, the learning facilitator, and appropriate facilitator guidance. And really allows the clinical events to be understood more clinically and objectively through behavior, decision-making, impact, and learning progress. So it's, again, another way for them to look at that. DLM is debriefing for learning meaningful. It's a constituent or consistent structure. Each student through present that is presented, the information is presented to them and it's reinforced. So you give this to the student, they have a bit of information that they're looking at, and what they does is a worksheet that provides visual learning opportunities for students to learn the progress and learn the clinical simulation they did and how they can progress with that through the experience. So it's more of a reflective solution. The 6 phases: you have engaging, exploring, explaining, elaborating, evaluating, extending. It's interactive. Questioning, so it's a provoking thinking question. Focus on learning to think like a practitioner for those that don't think like practitioners or those that might not have the cognitive information, and really looks at that cognitive reflective approach. So we have those that are very, very brilliant didactically, and they go with didactic practice, but might not be strong in clinical evaluation and clinical decision making. This debriefing method says, you know what, you've got the information there, you know the information, but how can we engage you quicker in the process of your clinical decision making? So those might have this. It's called DS or DLM. It's a process for them. It's a 6-phase approach that helps an interactive way for them to teach themselves. So I put students who are not strong clinically in this. I would give them a worksheet, DLM, and together under this talk period on debriefing for clinical decision making. Inquiry, again, the advocacy is framed as an answer, adaptation or observation. Instead identifies a competency of the simulation explorer. So what question often placed is what happens if the patient shouldn't have died? What happens if the patient went into cardiac arrest and I didn't act quickly enough? And students are really engaged or really upset. And say, okay, why this happened? How did this occur? How do you feel the way you feel right now? What's occurring? I try and open-ended questions. I don't do a lot of direct questions. I want to see what their summative information is, and this advocacy comes back to an inner social skill. Somewhere along the line, there was a situational event or that could have occurred. So I put this. Action, again, is a realistic, strategic way. Strategic plan, unique environment allows them to reflect upon the information. Try and avoid coaching, but here it's coaching who educates students in traditions of the calling, helps them by doing the right thing because they have this right feeling or telling of knowing what to do. And the first way of knowing, empirical. The second way of knowing is aesthetic. Third way of knowing is personal knowledge, and final way of knowing is the moral competent idea of what needs to be you're looking at. So sometimes the reflection might be more of heuristic. So the thing looks at the input, which is the flat line, basis, foundation, and dive deeper into the iceberg to more ethical questions of why this occurred and reflect on that thing. Model of a guided reflection I presented to you for you guys to look at, just some general information. This is a questionnaire. I'm not going to go through it. But a chance to see it. These are the questions you often ask to dive deep into those ethical questions. So sometimes debriefing, experience scales, subscales, and items, they analyze the thoughts and feelings. They're learning to make connections. And this is a table that was taken from Sophia. And we look at a debriefing model, the provision model, the simulation model, and we clarify problems. So these are things that you can look at towards connection.
There's a quick question, Joseph, and we only have about 5 minutes left. Does the speaker change his model of debriefing with some simulations, or does he try to stay with one model?
Very good question. I try and stay with one model. I know the simulation is what I'm doing. If it's a palliative simulation, advocacy and inquiry, you have different types of debriefing models out there, and you can any one of them depending on the simulation you have. Personal review, and I like it, is the plus delta or plus change. I like that because it outlines specific things. I'll do this since we have 5 minutes left, but just to give you information, this is a debriefing model that's been presented, and this was presented again by Sophia in the National League of Nursing. It's just an introduction, experience, reflection, thinking, applying, and summary, and I'll go through this in the next couple slides. The model, we always thank a student, establish confidentiality, state the role. What is your role? What do you want to do? What is your facilitator? You have to engage students. You have to review learning objectives and summarize the simulated scenario. You want to do this concept called experiencing concrete and experiences. You want the participants to feel. You want to know that you understand their feelings. They are recognized. What's right with the simulation? How do you feel right now? What's going on? You want to observe these roles and just have them express their personal feelings. On it. What happened? What went right? What went wrong? Did you have sufficient knowledge? Did you work as a team? Did it work well? What interactions occurred? What intervention did you do? What went half? Did you use your S-bar? Did you have your primary skills for the scenario? Concept. Did you engage the concept? Did you take the knowledge based on the concept before to the setting? Did some of you use real-life scenarios? Did some of you engage yourself towards clinical practice? This applies to experimentation, or, you know, I did this last month because I saw this in an event, and this is what I thought would be right. So we engage that. And then put it all together and say, what should have been done? What could I have done better? Things went right and wrong, safety issues, anything else that we'd like to discuss that could be put into this or outside this that you might have seen. Participants, as a summary, learning progress, clarify, close with a positive. Always debrief with a positive. Give them a take-home message. Give them the necessary information, but always end with a positive. Some way, somehow, it all provides positive feedback for the simulation progress for them to incur a new experience for that. Preparation, just general debriefing questionnaires that you can give. References.
Thank you, and we have one question here. Will we be able to get a copy of the PowerPoint slides and the references and sources used in the presentation?
Yes.
Can we put that up like in a PDF, just PDF your whole thing? Yeah. We'll put that up on our Health Force Minnesota website. You can receive a continuing education certificate of attendance by completing a survey, and it's up in surveymonkey.com. /r/prebriefing and debriefing. I also have this link up in the MnSHEP website for you. It's like only 3 questions, and then it gives you a URL that you can put in, and you'll get a certificate that you can download and print off for yourself. I want to thank Dr. Hayne for his time today. If you have any questions that you would like me to forward to him, I certainly can. This is Sue Field, sfield@winona.edu. That's sfield@winona.edu. Just email me your questions and I can forward them back to Dr. Buhane. Don't forget that next month we have the virtual simulation webinar. The following month we have the site visit at North Hennepin Community College, and we will be having somebody talking on spiraling simulations throughout a curriculum. We hope that you have a wonderful day, and once again we thank Dr. Buhane for his time. Thank you.